Alrighty, cherubs. So today we're going to finish up Egypt, and we're going to go talk about the Amarna period. Now, this is this little blip in all of this crazy little blip here in the New Kingdom, in the tail end of the 18th dynasty, where things are going to go sideways, and art's going to change, culture's going to everything's going to change for this little tiny period of time, and then it's going to go right back to the way it was. Okay, so before we get there, though, make sure you take your quiz on last time's pieces, these New Kingdom pieces, and don't forget the architectural terms, too. Now, these pieces today, the one may look familiar to you, the other maybe not so much, unless you've watched Ancient Aliens, okay? So, before we move on, I want to throw these at you. So, what's in a name? What do these names have in common? Okay, let's take a look at them for a second. These are all Hebrew names. Alrighty. We've got Jonathan, Joshua, Joaquin, Josiah, Isaiah, Michelle, and the male equivalent Michael, Gabriel, and the male equivalent Gabriel, Ariel, Nathaniel. Okay? These names all have something in common. They all, like I said, are Hebrew-based, and they all contain the name of God. Right? If we take a look at Jonathan, the root of Jonathan is Nathan. Okay? And they've added a Joe. When you see a Joe on the front of a name, that refers to Jehovah, the Hebrew God. Okay? Same with Joshua. Same with Joaquin. Same with Josiah. Now, Yah at the end also refers to Jehovah, Yahweh. All right? So Josiah gets a double whammy. It's a Jehovah, Jehovah. Okay? Now, the other names, it's the ending. It's the L. Now, the L, this L, is a feminization of the masculine El, Ariel, Nathaniel. Okay, that El refers to a different Hebrew god, not Jehovah, Elohim. Okay, or El. The Hebrews worshipped different gods at different periods of time, and then they kind of got lumped into. They all kind of became the same being eventually, but because of just the passage of time, they became monotheistic. So the name of God in Hebrew was forbidden to be said. You couldn't say it and you couldn't write it. Okay? So they would just use the consonants and it was called the Tetragrammaton, and it was the name of God. Okay? And even the four consonants in his name were considered a no-no. So you didn't ever actually say this, okay, which is Yahweh. You didn't ever say the name of God for the ancient Hebrews. You would just say God, okay? Now this, when they're translating this into English, when the Bible gets translated eventually into, it comes down through various languages and eventually gets translated, first into Greek, then into Latin, then into English. When they get to this, they're not sure what to do with it. And eventually the name Yahweh gets transliterated as Jehovah. Okay? So the name Jehovah never actually appears in the Bible. It is a transliteration of the name Yahweh. Okay? and then like I said previously, one of the other ancient Hebrew gods was Elohim or El. Okay, two separate entities. Now, and eventually they're going to get amalgamated because they're going to become monotheistic. All right. So that's where we get these endings to these names. And so all of these names have different meanings, like Michael, he, or Michelle, she, who is like God. Okay. So they're all going to have meanings like that. Ariel is the altar of God. Altar of God. Okay. So they're all going to have Jehovah saves, etc. They're all going to have different meanings like that. Okay. So when they translate it to English, then they're not sure what to do with it, and so they follow the Hebrew, and so they say wherever it said this in the original text, they don't name God, they just say Lord. So if you read the Bible, that's what it's going to say, is Lord, when it's referring to this guy. Okay? Now, what's the deal with the Amarna period, and how does that all relate? Okay, it wasn't an uncommon thing in the ancient world to include the name of God or a god in your name. At the tail end of the 18th dynasty in Egypt, we're getting this guy, Amenhotep IV. He ascends to power and becomes the pharaoh. Now, the name you can see here, Amun, Amen, it's spelled differently sometimes, but it's Amun, like Amun-Ra. Okay, so he's named for Amun-Ra in his name. Amenhotep the fourth is going to become pharaoh, and he is going to not live up to his namesake, let's say. He's going to close all the temples of Amun-Ra. He's going to disband the priesthood of Amun-Ra. And remember, they were politically very, very powerful, almost on par with the pharaoh. Like, they're very important. And he closes the doors and says, "You're all unemployed now. Go away." He introduces the worship of a different aspect of the sun. Now, Ra was the sun. Amun-Ra was a sun god. But he's going to introduce a different worship of the different aspect of the sun. It's just going to be the disk. And that god's name was Aten. Okay, the Aten. He's going to change his name from Amun-Hotep to Akhenaten. Okay, Akhenaten. So he has the name of the Aten in his name. And he's going to move the capital to a place out in the desert, and he's going to build a new city, and that city is called Amarna. So that's what we call this the Amarna period, because he takes the capital out of Thebes and moves it to this brand new city that he builds called Amarna. So he's going to radically change the whole setup of Egypt, and he's going to change the way that they're worshiping and the way that they address the world and the way they address art too. We're going to take a look at what that looks like here in just a second. Okay, so Amenhotep IV, and this is an early statuette of him, and he's going to become Akhenaten. Now you can see here, Akhenaten is radically different. He's depicted radically different than everything else in Egypt. Go ahead and take a second and just look at it and see what is different. Okay, you'll notice that it's extremely elongated. Okay, the figure's stretched out. Now, we're not sure if Akhenaten actually looked like this or if he was just depicted in this way. So we don't know if it's more natural or if it's just a stylistic choice. We're not sure, okay? But he does make the change of stretching out the figures, okay? The lips are depicted as being very full. The cheeks are going to be sunken in. He's going to have wide hips. He's going to have really broad hips, unusual for a man, and especially unusual for an idealized man. Okay, and he's also going to be, his shape appears more feminine. And so again, we're not sure if that's really how he looked or if that's just how he was depicted. Okay, but he's going to change the way that art is made and religion is practiced. When he closes the doors to the temples, he does not hire a new class of priests to help him worship the Aten. He and his wife, one of his wives, his main wife, Nefertiti, become the sole priests of the new religion. Only they are able to worship the Aten and access their blessing, its blessing. Okay? Everyone has to go through and worship the Aten through Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti. Okay? So, radically different approach. The first monotheistic approach to religion in world history. So here is Amun-Ra, and here is the Aten. So we're seeing, again, he's the sun disk with the rays that terminate in his little hands. Okay? And those hands bring blessings to Akhenaten and his family. I'm going to link this down below. This is a Photoshop reconstruction of what he may have looked like in real life. Now, this is his main wife, carved by the sculptor Tutmose. Okay? And he is going to depict her. This is Nefertiti. And considered one of the most beautiful statues ever found, ever created. Okay? We know that she was powerful. We know that she was his co-regent, that she ruled with him, with Akhenaten. And we know that they were in love, which for the ancient world was not a guarantee and was the exception rather than the rule. So they really had this kind of this storybook romance. Okay, we're gonna we'll watch this clip. Please watch it down below. But it's just gonna give you a brief. It's a 4-minute clip. It's gonna give you a brief explanation of how Akhenaten changes the world for the Egyptians and just kind of turns everything on its head. All right, so our first piece coming to us from Egypt is this relief sculpture, this sunken relief, and it is called Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and the Three Daughters. This is from the Amarna period of the 18th Dynasty, New Kingdom, 1353 to 1335 BCE. And it's limestone. Now, if we take a peek at it, we can see the Aten, front and center, offering blessings. You can see they're offering on the hands, some of the hands, they're carrying ankhs. The symbol of the ankh is a symbol for life. He's blessing them with long life. Akhenaten is seated on his throne. He is depicted slightly larger, but essentially the same as his wife Nefertiti. And they are holding their 3 daughters. Okay. Now the daughters get depicted strange. You remember, the depictions are odd, different from previous sculptures. Akhenaten is, again, all the figures are stretched out. They're elongated. They have these elongated limbs. They have elongated heads. Okay. Elongated heads. Sunken cheeks, kind of a bit of a belly, right? But what they're doing is the daughter is sitting in her lap, and and Nefertiti's holding the baby, and she's got the other one on her lap, and Akhenaten is taking his daughter into his arms and kissing her, and they're playing together. And for me, this is one of the most just charming representations from the ancient world of this very tender scene of this family that loves each other, and they're spending time together, and he's not being a conqueror, and he's not like being this big warrior. He's being a dad. And to see this so in the ancient past, this very tender, loving scene of a father kissing his daughter and with his wife, and she's holding the babies, and it's really, really special, and it's really, really tender. And this was used in a private home altar, okay, for worshiping the Aten. Again, they were the only ones who were allowed to worship the Aten. But the fact that they're using this as a place to worship, I think it just says a lot about the kind of guy that he was, the kind of couple they were, that they cherished family. And I think that's very sweet and very, very tender. I love this relief. I just think it's so beautiful for what it represents. Okay? Again, I will link this video down below so you can give it a watch. So again, it is sunken relief. We do get some hierarchical scaling because the kids aren't really depicted as children, they're just miniature adults. We are worshiping the Aten, and it is a panel from an altar at home. We get some of the stylistic changes. They're listed out for you. So go ahead and jot these down, okay? Go ahead and jot your notes down. Which brings us to this guy. Hopefully you know who this guy is, okay? Now, he was born as Tutankhaten. Tutankhaten. Okay, but that's not how we know him today. We know him as Tutankhamun. Okay, Tutankhamun. What's going to happen is, well, Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, is going to die. He has several wives, as is custom. He is married to Nefertiti, that is his chief wife, and they're going to have multiple daughters. He's going to have another wife, and by her, he's going to have a son, and his name is Tutankhaten. Tutankhaten is going to marry, as was the custom, his sister, his half-sister. Okay, kind of like the Targaryens from Game of Thrones, and he's going to marry his half-sister. He's going to die relatively youngish, which leaves Tutankhaten to become the pharaoh, which he does at age 9. So he's the boy king. Okay? Without Akhenaten there to kind of enforce his vision on the world, the priests of Amun are just waiting in the wings, waiting for Akhenaten to pass. And when he does, they take action. Okay, so they force Tutankhaten to change his name back to Tutankhamun, Tutankhamun, and then to reopen the temples and re-establish the priesthood of Amun-Ra, which she does because he's a child. Okay? We don't know what happens to Nefertiti. We don't know what happens to her. It's suspected that she rules as pharaoh in her own right for a bit, but we're not sure ultimately what happens. And They think they found her tomb, that it's an extension, a hidden chamber off of Tut's tomb, but we're not sure. Okay. Tut is famous, and I'm going to link this down below as well, but the nitty gritty is that Tut is famous. He was an insignificant pharaoh. He only reigned for 10 years. He accomplished nothing. He was 19 when he died. He accomplished nothing except for restoring the priesthood of Amun-Ra and moving the capital back to Thebes. The reason why he's famous is because his tomb was one of the last pharaonic tombs to be found, and it was the only one that was found mostly intact. All other pharaonic tombs that were found were plundered anciently. Tut's tomb survived. And so when they find his grave in the 30s, Howard Carter finds his grave in the 1930s, it was this international sensation. And the stuff that came pouring out. And again, he was a minor pharaoh. He was nobody as in the reign, in 3,000 years and 30 dynasties. He was not important. But the stuff, the treasure that came pouring out of this tomb was so rich and so just beautiful that it was really difficult to imagine what was entombed with some of these other people, more important pharaohs, that conquered or established trade routes or did other things. Okay, he really, and that's what this video is going to tell you, is that he didn't really do anything. It's just that his stuff wasn't robbed. Okay, which leads us to this piece. Now, Tut was buried in a series of coffins, of nesting coffins. And this is the innermost coffin. And this is the piece that AP has chosen. You can see that he is wearing the Nemes headdress. You can see that he's holding the crook and the flail. You can see that he's got vultures, vulture, cobra, royal symbols, okay? And that it's made out of gold. The craftsmanship, the level of craftsmanship to be able to make this coffin, and then the mask that goes underneath it that he was actually wearing, the gold mask, is unsurpassed in the ancient world. So the blue is, we've got turquoise happening, but we've also got lapis happening. That stone from Afghanistan's popping up again. Okay, so they had a huge trade network again. Okay, so this is inscribed with symbols of Isis and other gods as protection. Right? So the coffin itself is 6 foot 7 inches long. He is not that big. Okay, he's not that big. It's bigger than it needs to be. He's holding those symbols of Osiris, of pharaonic power, and it depicts his features as he would have looked. Okay. We know that he did have some physical handicaps because of genetic problems, because of his family relationships. But that comes with the territory. Oh, excuse me, I said the 30s. He was found in the 20s. Howard Carter. Okay. I will link this down below, the tour of Tut's tomb. Go ahead and give that a watch and see what his tomb actually looks like. This has nothing to do with art history. I just throw this in here. But the idea of the mummy's curse comes from Tut. That when they found his tomb, it did have an inscription on it that said, "Death will come to those who break in here." And they claimed that certain people associated with the dig, with the discovery of Tut's tomb, or died mysteriously. But Howard Carter lived a long life. He was the main guy that disturbed the tomb, um, and disturbed the mummy of Tut, and he lived to be just fine. So there is no curse. But the idea of the mummy's curse, from Scooby Doo or from every popular culture, comes from King Tut, which is just kind of interesting. So I'll link this video down below as well. The Amarna period ends shortly after Tut dies, and with it, everything just goes back to the way it had always been. So the 18th dynasty ends shortly after Tut. There was one more pharaoh after Tut. It was his great granduncle, and that's it. The Amarna period ends with the end of the 18th dynasty. The 19th dynasty happens, and everything just continues on the way it always had, like it never even happened. So Amarna pieces are extremely valuable because they're extremely rare. A lot of Akhenaten's things were defaced. So if you heard from last time, Hatshepsut's statues was defaced, so was Akhenaten's, for the exact same reasons. He messed with the order of things. All right. Egypt comes into our lives in many, many different ways. It plays into 21st century America all over the place, from the pyramid on the dollar bill to the obelisk that stands in Washington, D.C. that we built to honor our first president. Okay, Egyptian culture is a thing that still gets reflected in our world. This was a building that I saw. I was walking in New Orleans, and I was just walking down in the French Quarter, and there was this stone building that had these papyriform columns, and I thought, crazy, Egypt. Downtown Salt Lake City, we get the Masonic Temple, but you're getting sphinxes, and you're getting the sun disk with the cobras, and you're getting the bud capitals with the Egyptiform columns, and the whole building is shaped like a pylon. Okay, so with tilted sides, and it's shaped like a pylon. So Egypt still keeps happening. And if you go downtown in Salt Lake City, you're also going to find the Joseph Smith Sphinx, which was built in the 60s. And it's a sphinx with Joseph Smith's face on it. I highly recommend you go to Gilgal Gardens and check it out. It's something to see. So Egypt still is a thing that has pull and influence on our modern world. And that's our video today about Amarna and about Egypt. Next time, we're going to start in on Greece. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.